One thing that I hear a lot from national security folks is that after 9/11, it was Robert Mueller and George Tenet who appeared on Capitol Hill to testify before Congress more than any cabinet officials in the history of the country. And that the FBI, for a period, was as known for never again failing to connect the dots. What happens to the national security functions of the FBI under what the New York Times describes, at the FBI at least, the two least experienced men to ever lead that department?
Right. Well, it's a combination of two things. They've put in two very inexperienced people, neither of whom have spent a day at the FBI, and they're the ones who will be leading this organization. And at the same time, they've removed about half a dozen or so of the senior leaders at the FBI, the people who had decades of experience and expertise on matters like counterterrorism and national security and domestic crimes. And there's also something of a brewing war against the rank and file. One of the things that the new Justice Department leadership did a couple of weeks ago is demand that every one of the FBI agents who worked in any way on the January 6th investigation and prosecutions provide information about what role they exactly played. And the memorandum which directed this, which had the subject line terminations, said this information was being collected specifically in order to review the data for possible personnel actions. Now, the January 6th investigation, that was the largest investigation in the Bureau's history. It touched thousands and thousands of agents across the country. They're all now swept up in this process too. So you are simultaneously bringing in highly inexperienced people at the top and removing the senior leadership and at least threatening to remove some of the core rank and file. And look, you know, the FBI has an extraordinarily important mission. You know, they are the lead investigative agency in our government that protects against all sorts of violence, bomb threats, organized crime, gang violence, as well as fraud and public corruption and other white-collar crime. I mean, you go on and on and on. And if you put people at the top who have no real experience in leading FBI federal law enforcement, then you're going to systematically degrade the capability of the government to perform those functions. And that's something we're all going to suffer from over the course of the next few years.
I mean, I think that's the most ominous piece of this, that there are no winners when the Department of Justice and the FBI become political weapons to be used, to be wielded on behalf of anybody, but on behalf of someone who is promising to purge the department of all this talent and all of these individuals who were part of, as Peter said, the largest investigation in the department's history.
So just to add to more bad news, the people who are assigned to have some sort of checking oversight function are all being fired or have been fired. The Inspector Generals, a group called the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. I remember when I was at the Bureau, I thought they were just phenomenal, bipartisan, so important to have them. It was an oversight functioning. The Office of Special Counsel, where they're in the process of trying to remove Mr. Dellinger, who heads that. That's not to be confused with the special counsel.
Right.
It's a separate agency. You then can have the same conversation that we just had about the Department of Justice, sort of my home, of like, you know, Main Justice and the FBI. You can have that exact conversation of the hollowing out of that in terms of wanting to have the people who lead it be just loyal to a person, a king, and have that conversation in an area that's, I think, equally, if not more, terrifying, which is the military. Mm-hmm. You have the leaders also being removed, and you have the lawyers, the lead lawyers there being removed. And that is, you know, as a lawyer, that is so important, because what you know when you are at the department or if you're at the JAG is that you actually owe your loyalty to the Constitution, and it's completely bipartisan, and that military justice is a really strong thing in the same way that at the FBI and at Main Justice. It is about the rule of law. And so you are seeing this in so many areas. But just to take two, it's the Department of Justice and the military. If you are planning on running a fascist regime, that's what you attack.
Well, to Peter's point and to Andrew's point, that is not what people thought they were getting. And it did not have to happen. I mean, the reason it happened is because Republicans agreed to let it happen. Why?
That's right. So look, at the voter level, 90% of politics happens in the low information space. It's not the most flattering term, but I don't think most people, even today, fully would understand what we're talking about here. But certainly Republicans on the Hill did. And the reason they've allowed it is because they're followers, not leaders. The one ability to rush to a crisis, and I think we are in a crisis. This is not just words by Ed Martin. This is the ethos of Donald Trump and the administration. The one ability to immediately rush to a crisis is the power of impeachment. I mean, that's it. We can go through all the mechanics of hearings and so forth, but it's power of impeachment, and Republicans have said they're not going to do that. So what does it leave us with? It leaves us with relying on an informed citizenry. And citizenship requires a diligence. Patriotism requires a commitment. And we know there is likely more damage to occur before we can use the democratic tools of citizenry to push back and to fight back. But I do think it's there. We know it's there. We're seeing it in town halls this week. We're seeing it in the coverage you provide. And, you know, I think we discussed this before. In these very dark days, I kind of focus on what is the offense that we can be playing as a country. And I always break it down to three things: oppose, propose, and prepare. We have to give voice to the opposition against all of this, because if we don't, imagine a vacuum where the concerns are not being shared among the electorate. And I think we have to propose a way forward that honors the Constitution and looks different. What would happen if we're able to change the presidency or the Congress in 2 years? What does that look like? Does it mean an impeachment? Does it mean hearings? Does it mean censure? What does it mean? And then preparing. I mean, the one tool we have are elections. That is the most basic of our democratic tools.
Yeah.
And we have to prepare what should be a groundswell of opposition to what we're seeing that shows up next November.
I think there is the only thing I disagree with is I don't think the 90% of the public had no information. I think they didn't believe it. And I think they had too much faith in checks and balances. I think they nominated, a drunk uncle, but they didn't want him to drive. They wanted him in the back of the limo, being a lunatic, the people that voted for him. They didn't think he would, put on his blindfold, put his equally insane cousin from South Africa, in the seat next to him and drive the car off the cliff. And I think that you can't call the citizens of this country low information if you watch any of those town halls. They are saying things that if you only watch Fox News, you have worked to find out that Trump is destroying the Constitution. Sure. If you're a MAGA voter, you voted for Trump, and you like some of what he was saying, and he scared you enough about immigration or whatever else he was ranting and raving about, and you listen to these, and they only watch Fox News, they know that Elon Musk is not abiding by the Constitution. They know that people are suffering from the things that his effort to cut costs, I'm not going to call it a name because it's fake. They know that Donald Trump is totally unchecked, and 81% of all Americans still think that Putin's the bad guy. You didn't learn that on Fox. I mean, people aren't hostage to low information. They just didn't think that the Congress would collapse. They didn't think they'd hand the drunk uncle the keys.
Sure. Or maybe they didn't care. I mean, personally, I think it's somewhere in between here. But I think Donald Trump speaks to a certain baseline of politics that is often incorrect, which is the economy was bad, I'm going to make it better. Yeah. We're weak, we're going to be stronger. And most voters say, yeah, that's the direction I want to go. And they don't understand the dismantling of the Department of Justice. I think there are a lot of informed voters, and I certainly don't mean that nobody's paying attention. People are.
Yeah.
We're seeing it.
It had to get this bad, though. Maybe.
It had to get this bad.
Yeah, okay.